Good afternoon. We're back at the State Emergency Operations Center here in Tallahassee, providing an update on Hurricane Helene. It is a hurricane now, and it is getting ready to rev on through the Gulf of Mexico. It's just now getting past the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba. Joining with me here today is the Executive Director of the Florida Division of Emergency Management, Kevin Guthrie, our Florida Department of Transportation Secretary, Jared Perdue, Major General John Haas from the Florida National Guard, and Corey Simon, the state senator for District 3, which includes the area that's currently in the eye of the storm, Tallahassee and surrounding counties. Of course, we are under a state of emergency and have been since the beginning of the week. We have 61 counties that are included in that. We have now maximum sustained winds of 80 miles per hour. Most of the models have this becoming a major hurricane. Some even have it becoming a Category 4. You have time to implement your plan so that you're prepared for this storm. Those who are under evacuation orders have the ability to do it. You have the ability to make sure you have gas, make sure you have non-perishable food, water. All those things can still be done today, but just know these effects are coming to the state of Florida, and it's not a matter of whether we're going to get effects. It's just a question of how significant those effects will be. This could, as I mentioned, be a major hurricane. It could hit as a major hurricane. Some models even have it as a Category 4, but I think a lot of people are expecting at least a Category 3. It is a fast-moving storm. It's projected to leave up to 12 inches of rainfall, and the storm surge could reach 10 to 15 feet in some areas, which is, of course, very, very significant. So while we are hoping that maybe it comes in under that, we're preparing for it to reach those levels. You're going to have both wind and water hazards from this storm. Here in the Tallahassee region in the Big Bend, almost every run and model agrees that this storm, the eye of the storm, is coming in this region. And so maybe that could change a little bit. We'll see. There'll be an update at 5 o'clock, but I don't think we're anticipating anything dramatically different than what we've been seeing. So this is likely going to be where the eye of the storm goes, but of course the impacts are going to be far beyond the eye of the storm. You're looking at winds that are stretching 200 plus miles away from the eye of the storm, so that entire Gulf Coast of Florida, even places like Charlotte and Sarasota, of course the Tampa Bay area, and then up along the Nature Coast in the Big Bend, expect to see a surge. This thing's going to be whipping through. It's going to cause a lot of churn, and it is going to drive that water. And so it is going to be a significant water event. So be prepared for that. As I said, you still have time to do what you need to do to execute your plan. If you are under an order, you can go ahead and execute that order to evacuate, particularly if you're at a barrier island, if you're on a low-lying area. If you are leaving your house or if you're staying at your house, either way, don't leave loose items outside your house. You have 100, 120 mile an hour winds. That is going to make a big difference. So the rule of thumb is if you can pick it up, put it up, bring it inside. We've brought a lot of stuff inside at our place here in Tallahassee, baseball gloves, bats, all these other things. Get it inside the house. It will go flying around if you are in the path of this storm. We currently have evacuations that have been issued by local governments in the following counties. Now, most of these are for coastal residents. Some are for mobile homes, manufactured housing, and RV parks. But the following counties have orders in place: Charlotte, Citrus, Dixie, Franklin, Gulf, Hillsborough, Jefferson, Lafayette, Leon, Levy, Manatee, Pasco, Pinellas, Sarasota, Taylor, and Wakulla counties. You also have more modest evacuations that are in effect in multiple counties. If you are in one of those low-lying areas, and given the surge that you could see from this storm, we recommend that you heed those instructions. You don't have to evacuate hundreds of miles. You don't have to outrun. If you look at how this storm is going to go, it's going to hit the northern part of Florida, and it's going to keep moving. And it's going to get into southern Georgia. It's going to get into probably Atlanta. It's going to get into Tennessee, Carolina region, and just kind of stall out a little bit. So Florida, we're just kind of the opening act. You're going to see more. So to try to outrun it is probably not something that is advisable. you can go within your own county to higher ground, a shelter, hotel, friends, family house. That is totally sufficient from this. Remember, you hide from wind, but you run from the water. Counties under evacuation orders, if you have a question about whether you are under one, floridadisaster.org/evacuation orders. Now, all counties are going to have at least one pet-friendly shelter, so we would urge you to take advantage of that. Do not leave your pets behind. They need your help too. If you want up-to-date shelter status information, you can go to floridadisaster.org/shelters. You can also talk to your local EM team or your local county leadership. And again, we have at least one pet-friendly shelter in every county. I'm also happy to announce that the Florida Division of Emergency Management has partnered with Uber to provide free rides to shelters for Floridians in counties with a declared state of emergency. So if you want to utilize this offer from Uber, you use the promo code Helene Relief when you book your ride. HELENERELIEF, Helene Relief, and you can get a free Uber ride to a shelter for areas that are under a state of emergency. Also, when you have major storms, some of the biggest dangers are driving during the storm and then trees falling on roofs. Don't try to go out on the roadways once you start to see this storm hitting. You have time to execute what you need to do today, but we are going to start seeing effects of this probably first thing in the morning, I'd say, probably at the latest. So you have time, but you don't have a lot of time. But do not go out in the middle of the storm. We see traffic fatalities almost every storm because of transportation issues in the eye of the storm. And you don't need to do that when you have massive winds. I mean, even if you're interior in Florida, somewhere in the Florida Peninsula, you're going to have the gusts you'll get 200 miles from the center of the storm are going to be some significant gusts, and it is going to cause some havoc on the road. If you are sheltering in your home, be aware of where tree limbs are in relation to your house. Try to be in an interior room or away from limbs that could fall through the roof or window and cause harm. And we do see, unfortunately, this happen when you have these storms, particularly in this part of the state here in Tallahassee. It's heavily wooded. I've mentioned many times how the newer construction does very well in these storms because it's built to specification. Honestly, here in Tallahassee, some of these older homes were built really well too, if you look at them, but there's trees everywhere. So it's one thing to be able to withstand wind hitting the house. It's a much different thing if you're going to try to withstand a massive tree falling on your house. So just have a sense of where that is, and just know we could be having here in Tallahassee, you could have 120, 125 mile an hour winds that are coming through this area, and that is really significant, particularly in an area that is heavily tree lined as this place is. The Florida Division of Emergency Management is in the process of fulfilling over 950 missions from local governments and counties. They've done everything from high water vehicles to providing water tarps, generators, as well as additional first responders and personnel. We have shelf-stable meals, tens of thousands of those, near the anticipated area of storm impact, and they will be deployed as needed once the storm passes. We're continuing to bring more and more utility linemen into the state of Florida. We're over 21,000 now, but those numbers are growing. It's unclear exactly how many linemen are going to be needed because if you look at where the storm's going to hit, the eye of the storm is probably going to hit the northern part of the state, then get into Georgia. Doesn't mean you're not going to have power outages elsewhere, but I think a storm like Ian, which the eye really rode through massive parts of the state, left millions and millions without power, it may be different, so we'll see. But bottom line is we're bringing in more and more utility workers, and they will be on scene as soon as it's safe to do so, and power restoration is a priority. Now, as much of a priority as that is, I was down with Tico in Tampa. We're probably going to stop by someplace tomorrow and thank the linemen for what they're doing. And as hard as they're working and as efficient as they are, be prepared to lose power in a storm like this. That's just the nature of it. So make sure you have what you need to be able to ride that out as long as it takes. And in Florida, because we do this, you're probably going to be have power quicker than maybe you would in some other places where they don't do this. But nevertheless, you should anticipate power outages. We also have internet ready with the Starlink internet system. So as internet goes out, if that's needed, we can deploy the Starlink devices and get the internet. I'll tell you, it's really, really good internet. You need the device to be able to do it, but once you have that device, if you're able to link onto it, crystal clear. It worked very well after Ian, and hopefully we won't need it, but if we do need it, it's definitely going to be able to do what needs to be done to get you guys back online, particularly our small businesses. We have now deployed a lot of the flood protection devices, particularly around utility substations. We have more of this, and we don't necessarily have everyone has not requested it. If you do want it, the time is ticking for you to do it, because by the time Kevin and his team deploy it, he's only got a limited amount of time. They're not going to be going out tomorrow in the middle of the storm deploying flood protection devices. So if you need one, particularly if you're north of I-4, you got to tell Kevin and his team immediately so they can get these things out on the road and get them deployed as need be. We have deployed flood protection barriers in locations like fire stations in Tampa, utility substations in places like Cedar Key, Bradenton, and Steinhatchee. We're happy to do more, but if you want that, the time is quickly running out. Of course, we have National Guard, as I've already mentioned. 3,500 soldiers are ready. We can surge up to 5,500 if needed, and if they are needed, we will do that. We also are now under an FDOT emergency order that lifts weight restrictions and allowing the bypass of weigh stations for emergency response vehicles, including utility vehicles staging for rapid response. FDOT has 1,700 team members working to prepare. They've also staged 550 generators, 230 pieces of large equipment, and 40 large pumps. Kevin and his team also have fuel that is being brought into the state. I know that people have been in line for fuel. I don't think that they've necessarily run out, but it is being topped off if some of these stations do. If the power goes out, it makes it harder for them to do. So if they're running on generator, great. If they're not, they're going to need to get the power back on. But regardless, there is fuel mission being executed to make sure we have enough fuel here in the state of Florida to get us through the next few days. We are working through our Agency for Healthcare Administration with healthcare facilities as they are evaluating any of their evacuation plans. As of this afternoon, there are 62 facilities that have reported that they are in fact evacuating. That's hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and the like. Visit Florida has activated emergency accommodation modules on Expedia and Priceline to provide real-time hotel availability and lodging resources for impacted Floridians and visitors. So if you just go to those websites, there should be a pop-up that comes about Hurricane Helene. You click on it and you can do it. And again, the hotels in Florida, when we're under a state of emergency, they will accommodate you with your pet. And a lot of hotels do that anyways. Not all of them do it. When we're under a state emergency, you can bring your pets and make sure you have them taken care of. So we are here. We are going to have this operations center running. Even though the storm is expected to hit here, Kevin is going to have some other folks in Escambia just in case. But the main event is going to be here. If you need to use those folks in Escambia tomorrow, they'll be there. Then as soon as the storm passes, those folks will be back here. You know, this building has never really been tested in terms of how it would handle a major hurricane. The walls apparently were built to Category 5 specifications, but back in '96 they didn't have enough money to make the roof Category 5 specification. So apparently the roof they think can handle 128, 129 mile an hour winds. So it should be fine, but we'll see, right? So we've made precautions just in case something happens to be able to continue the continuity without any major interruption. So I want to thank everybody who's been involved in working up to this point. We'll see, again, you have time today to do what you need to do. Once it gets tonight into tomorrow, you're going to be out of time. So make these decisions now, execute your plan. If you're in some of those low-lying areas, those surge-prone areas along Florida's Gulf Coast, just know you could be getting some major storm surge coming your way over the next 24 hours to 36 hours. That's just the reality. So please take precautions, do what you need to do to keep yourself and family safe. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Guthrie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Governor, again, thank you for your continued leadership and support for the division as we execute on this mission. Hurricane Helene is expected to continue to rapidly strengthen into a major hurricane before making landfall across Florida's Gulf Coast. We have continued to hold twice daily calls for all 67 county emergency management offices and state agencies to coordinate protective actions and needed resources ahead of potential storm impacts. As the governor has said, the state continues to work on more more than 950 resources and those requests from counties. We have filled about 10% of those, and I don't want you to dig into that number too much. A lot of the resource requests that we are getting right now are actually for post-landfall. People are already starting to order water. They're starting to order what we call point of distribution support, things of that nature. So about 30% of our resource requests are pre-landfall requests. The others are post-landfall requests. Those ones that are pre-landfall requests, they are being filled, and they will be filled before landfall happens. All but 3 counties in Florida are currently under some type of storm watch or warning. We have talked about the potential of life-threatening rising water moving inland from the coastline along the entire Gulf Coast to the eastern Florida panhandle. Some areas could experience, as the governor has mentioned, 10 to 15, other areas 5 to 8, other areas 3 to 5 feet. I just want to put some things in perspective here. I'll say this comically, me and my brother over here, you know, we're both 6 foot, 6'3" tall, give or take, and you know, that's a point of reference. You cannot survive that. If you're in an area that's going to have 5 to 8 foot, 10 to 15 foot of storm surge, you cannot survive that. So please make sure that you leave the area. Brian, I'm going to give you a warning. I'm going to come to a graphic that's right behind you real quick, just a second. So again, I might sound like a broken record, but I will keep saying this. The hazards are going to be far-reaching from this area with tropical storm force winds 250 to 300 miles out. So we want you to know your home and know your zone. More specifically, we want you to know your zone. When you go to your property appraiser's website or you go to any other website, you will most likely find 2 zones there. And we've got them up here on our graphics. We have FEMA flood zones, and you see those there, A, AE, V, VE, X, and X. But then you have next to that your actual evacuation zones that are used in the state of Florida. The reason I want to say this is, as you see there, the second FEMA flood zone is AE. Well, Franklin, Wakulla, Taylor, and other portions of counties have issued evacuation orders for A through E. To that point, I need you to look at the screen on the right. Again, that's A, B, B, C, D, and E. It's not your FEMA flood zone AE. So please make sure you're paying attention to the evacuation zone versus the flood zone. Thank you, Brian. So if your home address is not one of the labeled colors, you do not live in an evacuation zone, and therefore you need to know what year your house was built, and if it does, stand up to the Florida Building Code. Typically 1998 in Southeast Florida, the Miami-Dade Building Code went into effect, and then for the rest of the state of Florida, 2004, the Florida Building Code went into effect. So typically, if your house is built after 2004, most likely your house will withstand 115 mile an hour winds. So again, I bring that up because we're looking in the Tallahassee area of 120 to 125 mile an hour winds as of this news conference. Make decisions based on solid information that I've just given you. Again, I cannot reiterate what the governor has said. If you live in an area that has a lot of trees right up around your house, a lot of 40-foot pine trees, and you know you're going to have 120 mile an hour winds coming over the top of your house, you may want to consider an evacuation. You don't want to be in that house if those trees come down on top of your house. So make smart decisions, evaluate you and your plan and your family, and then execute on that. Make common sense decisions. If you're ordered to evacuate by local officials, please listen. Residents in the Big Bend of Florida needing evacuation assistance, especially in the areas of Taylor, Wakulla, and Franklin counties, you can call 1-800-729-4600 3413 for transportation assistance. The governor, with his leadership and through the execution of the Division of Emergency Management, we have executed on a number of buses to start taking people from those counties into Leon County for the purposes of sheltering. So again, I'm going to repeat that number. For residents in the Big Bend of Florida needing evacuation assistance, call 1-800-729-3413. The State Assistance Information Line or cell line is now active. Residents needing resources before and after Hurricane Helene can call 1-800-342-3557. There are operators available in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole to provide answers to your questions. You should be finalizing your plans now, executing on your plans. Tomorrow midday will be way too late. Please be sure that you follow the agency on X and Instagram at FLSERT at Florida CERT and on Facebook at FDEM as we continue sharing important information about this storm in real time. Again, Governor, thank you so much for your leadership, your support of the division.
Thank you, Governor, for your leadership. Thank you, Kevin, for what you do at the division, and also all of our partners who we've been coordinating with. At FDOT, we've now been getting ready for this storm for several days. We've been in constant coordination with all of our partners in order to respond to Hurricane Helene. We are immediately upon arrival of the storm and leading up to that, we are working on facilitating evacuations. We're watching I-75, I-4, I-10 very closely. Here in Florida, we use what's known as emergency shoulder use to facilitate those evacuations. So we sent crews out to make sure all the shoulders were clear of debris. And when speeds get down to a limit below 45 miles per hour, we begin to look at opening those shoulders. We work very closely with Florida Highway Patrol to open those shoulders for evacuations. We have 10 traffic management centers across the state that are operating 24/7. So we're watching traffic live. Other than the normal stuff you see on I-4, which can be standstill at times, we have not seen heavy impacts from evacuations. We're watching that closely. We will be able to implement emergency shoulder use at a moment's notice when it's needed to facilitate those evacuations. Something else we've done to help with evacuations is we've extended our Road Ranger Service Patrol to a 24/7 operation in all of the impacted regions. And so those Road Ranger Service Patrol vehicles will be circulating through all of our facilities perpetually. They can offer aid to motorists, they can help people that are stranded, and they can also move vehicles out of the travelways so that it doesn't create more congestion for evacuations. As you heard from the governor, we have 1,700 FDOT personnel currently working this storm and deployed. We are staging resources all across the state. We like to bring people from all over the state and stage them as close as we can possibly get to the impact zone so that we can immediately get into that area and begin to work. We're heavily focused on initially the cut and toss operation after the storm comes through and making sure roadways are clear and open so that emergency responders, first responders, the life safety mission, and power restoration can begin without delay. We're also staging fuel across the state to support our law enforcement partners. We have 750 pieces of equipment. We have over 500 generators. As you heard from the governor, we have 40 pumps, and so we're ready to respond to this storm. I did sign an FDOT executive order for weights and measures for truck traffic, for utility vehicles, so they can bypass those weigh stations and not be delayed. Like I said, we've been coordinating very closely with our motor partners, our seaports, our airports, rail. Currently, the city of Tallahassee Airport, the St. Pete Airport, and Tampa Airport plan to close tomorrow. All of the other airports plan to remain open at this time. However, there is going to be a lot of weather coming in, and there could be significant delays to flights. So I would encourage everyone, please check with your airline if you have flights that are scheduled. Also coordinating with our seaports. Port of Key West is already closed, Waterside, and we'll be coordinating very closely with all of the other ports in the impact area, and they will be closing as needed as the storm approaches. Following the storm, we will immediately activate our response efforts. We're going to push into the impacted area. We're going to clear roads as fast as we can. We will immediately begin damage assessment and any emergency repairs that are needed so that people can safely move around. As the storm passes through and you begin to move around, and use the roads. I would encourage you, number one, do not drive through water of any kind. It can be really dangerous. Please be careful on bridges if you see water, if winds are high. The bridges across the state are typically in a storm closed by local law enforcement. Usually when the winds reach sustained 40 miles per hour, local law enforcement will begin to close those bridges to traffic. So please be careful. If you need up-to-date traffic information, Florida511.com is the best place to go after the storm passes through. Again, thank you, Governor.
So another issue that we've seen in more recent years is if you're in an area that is in the eye of where there can be storm surge and you have an electric vehicle, just know that when you have saltwater intrusion on that, those can catch on fire, and those are very difficult to put out. We had instances in Hurricane Ian where the homes were able to withstand the Cat 5. There was big surge. You know, they probably had water inundation in the first floor, but really big homes. But the EV caught on fire and it burned the house down. So if you have an EV, you need to get that to higher land. Be careful about that getting inundated. It can cause fires and it can cause a lot of problems. Also on generators, do not run your generator in your home. If you run your generator in your home, it can kill you. You don't want to be breathing in that carbon monoxide. You got to run it outside the home, keep it a safe distance from windows and doors, and they're great to use, but you got to use them appropriately. And I don't think we've had any fatalities in the more recent storms because we have pushed this message. Kevin has pushed it in the division, but please, when you're using those generators, do not run the generator inside. And then finally, on the evacuations, as we've stressed, you don't need to get in your car, try to outrun the storm and evacuate to a place where you're not going to have any impacts. If you're particularly in a low-lying area, if you get to higher ground, hurricane solid structure, then you can ride it out and then go back and hopefully get to your house as soon as you can. Now, if you are going to go a little bit further than local, just the way this storm is, there's going to be a lot of wind to the east, and it's going to continue moving to the north. And so really going west would probably be better. Again, you don't need to do that, but if you are going to get in your car and you're trying to find out where to get a hotel room, maybe you can't find one locally. If you're here in the Tallahassee area, in the region that's expected to get the eye of the storm, east and north is going to have problems for probably the next couple days. So just understand that and govern yourself accordingly. So we are of course, we're anticipating the impacts beginning probably sometime tomorrow morning in various parts of the state, and we're anticipating an impact here, likely in this Tallahassee region, Wakulla County, Franklin County area. I think the 5 p.m. advisory for the National Hurricane Center, from the data we've gotten up to this point, is likely to move it maybe just a tick to the west, not a huge move. But I think for those of us who've been through the last couple storms, both Idalia and Debbie, there was a thought that maybe it was Tally, and then it did do the bend to the east and got more into the Big Bend. We're just not seeing that yet on any of these models. Doesn't mean it can't happen. We'll see what happens over the next 12 hours or so. But I think these models, they want to take it to this region, and there's not a whole lot of disagreement amongst that. I think maybe 20, 30 mile disagreement between the models at the most. So they're continuing to say that. We haven't seen it necessarily bend east, and it may not bend east. So I know we've been through a couple of these recently in the last 2 years that took a similar path. This one looks like it may be similar, but probably not exact, and it's probably going to end up hitting further west than where those two storms did. Okay, yep.
Do you have any messages to those who've decided that they are going to ride it out despite a mandatory evacuation order in like Wakulla County or some of the others?
So here's what I would say. The way this is tracking is a storm that is stronger than what we've seen in this region, I think, in anyone's memory. And, you know, it's one thing for people in parts of the state that have been through a bunch of majors to do, but some of this may be untrodden ground, I think, certainly for most people who are living here now. So just know you've seen storms, but you probably haven't seen one that's going to be a Cat 3 plus when it's coming on. And that is going to produce a lot of hazardous conditions. And if folks are telling you to evacuate, you have an ability to go to a shelter here, whether it's here in Leon County, whether you can go stay with friends, family, hotel. Those are good options right now. So we are anticipating this thing to continue to pick up strength. Yeah, look, there are some models that have it at Cat 1 impact. There are some. Many more have it at Cat 3, but some have it at 1, some have it at 4. So you're looking at a really significant impact. And I remember Hurricane Hermine, I wasn't governor yet, but Hurricane Hermine impacted this area. This is forecast to be significantly stronger than Hermine was. And so that would probably not be the good reference point in terms of what you're facing. So worst case, if you go and stay in a shelter for a day, you go back and maybe you didn't have a lot of damage. Great. At best case scenario, great. But at worst case, you could end up with storm surge that could be very threatening. And so people should just heed that.
Are you and the family going to write it out in the governor's mansion? I mean, is that safe enough considering the EOC here?
I am going to be here. So when I come tomorrow, I'm going to be at the mansion tonight with the family, but I'll be here tomorrow, and I will just stay until the storm passes, so likely into Friday morning.
Is the mansion safe for the rest of the family, though?
We think so, but we haven't really had a storm, right? I mean, what I will say this about Tallahassee, some of these old buildings are really good buildings and really good. I mean, they were built well. Some old construction is not built well. Some of the stuff here, these are very stately, very nice things, and I see those buildings around in Tallahassee. Now, it doesn't mean for sure it can withstand that, but it's not like some of the old dilapidated structures that we see. So I think it's likely going to be fine, and we're planning. We have shutters up and everything like that. But no, I'll be here. We think that this is going to be fine, this building, but you never know, right? And so we have contingency plans in place. Also, Kevin is going to be sending a lot of the folks here home, close of business today, because we've done the prep, they've done the prep, and they need to be ready to be here for an extended period of time. They're probably not going to get out here. When people come tomorrow morning, bright and early, they're going to be here for probably 48 hours with no ability to go back. So they're planning for that, and I think he's making smart decisions to make sure everyone's rested and ready.
What's your message to the people in this area that might have severe weather fatigue? Because we've gone through Dahlia, Debbie, the tornadoes, all in the last 13 months.
Well, I would say, one, the tornadoes, if you were in the path of that was very destructive. There's no question. This storm on the current track is going to be way impactful for Franklin, Leon, Gadsden, Wakulla than either Idalia or Debbie because the track is different. In fact, I think the most recent track, the eye is slightly west of Tallahassee. And look, these things can move. Yeah, right on the county line. So what that means is you don't want the storm to be right to your west because that northeast part of the storm, that's the most significant part that causes the most damage. So we have not seen that in these counties in the greater Tallahassee area in the last couple years. Of course, the tornadoes were really significant. Those were targeted. You could go and see massive damage on one street, go 3 streets over, and you wouldn't have even known a tornado happened. That's not necessarily how this storm's going to be. This storm is going to be big. It's going to come. Probably the winds won't be as strong as a tornado would be, but when you're talking about 120, 125 mile an hour, potentially in Tallahassee, certainly on the coast as that makes landfall, those are not numbers that we've seen in recent years here in the Tallahassee region. So people should just be prepared for that. And, I know it's like you get ready and then it doesn't necessarily make a direct impact like Idalia. I remember we were preparing for Debbie. We worked very closely with the city and the mayor here in Tallahassee. We're doing a lot of prep together. And then it turned out that it wasn't as impactful for the city and for Leon County. This one, all indications are this is going to be different. And this is going to be one that does impact this region more directly than the last 2 storms have been. So I would just say heed the advice and the recommendations and any orders issued by your local officials. Know that we will be there to respond when the storm passes. You're going to have a lot of assets at the disposal here. There will be search and rescue. There will be meals, water, all that stuff. But you can't control what path the storm. We can't control how severe it is, but you can control what you do throughout the balance of today into tomorrow morning. So do things that are going to put you in the best possible situation to come out of this safely for you and your family. And I do think just the difference that I see in the Tallahassee region versus other parts of the state that have been hit is just there's just a lot of more debris that's likely to be flying around because we've got a lot of trees. I mean, when we had Idalia, we lost a massive tree, on the governor's property. Massive tree. I mean, it's been good for my kids because we have the whole lawn to play baseball and soccer and all that, and they love that. But I mean, this was a really nice big tree, and it basically got split in half. And that was not even a storm that was a direct impact. I mean, this was like an outer band and some of the winds that were more on the periphery. So you are going to see that, and that's going to be, Jared's going to be helping with cut and toss. I know the city and the county are working with DEM to make sure prepared. But when you're talking about power restoration, I've talked to the municipal cooperatives. They're taking this very seriously. They've done a much better job in recent years than maybe go back 10 years ago. Remember Hermine, there was relatively modest storm, but there was major power outages for extended period of time. I think their view is they don't want to do that. We have mutual aid coming in to ensure that doesn't happen. But at the same time, it may not be as easy as just saying, hey, just hook up these poles, because you may have a lot of debris that you have to clear before the crews can even get to. So there's a lot of things that can happen here, and just making the best decisions. And again, if you're on the coast with the surge, that's something that is really significant. If you're in an area that is covered in trees, and look, this is a beautiful part of this region. They're great trees. It's nice, but they do present a hazard when you're talking about in a residential area where if a tree falls on a roof, it could potentially collapse the roof. And roofs that are going to be able to withstand 125 mile an hour is one thing. Being able to withstand a massive tree falling on it is another. All right, well, we will have more updates as needed. I think probably the balance of the day, we're just going to continue working, fulfilling the requests, Kevin and his team. If there's other additional major updates, of course, we'll be doing things. But tomorrow, once it get into tomorrow, pretty much have to have executed your plan, and there will come a point that even if you're under an evacuation order, you start seeing 80 mile an hour, 90 mile an hour gusts. You're going to have to just hunker down at that point. So you still have time to do what you need to do, but please know the time where you're really not going to be able to execute the plan fully if it involves evacuating is coming to an end, probably by the end of today, first thing tomorrow morning. Thanks.